Evening, evening.
Hello.
Hello. Coming live from Scotland.
Well, close, close. Windy island on the shore, on the edge of a large ocean.
Well, it is pretty cold and we have a lot of sheep. So, yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Do
yeah.
you want to explain that?
Well, we've got more snow than Scotland because the
Yeah.
mountains are higher.
Ah, well, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and probably more cows and less. What's the population of Scotland? Do we have less people?
I think we have less people. Scotland's pretty populous because people wanting to live near England, I suppose.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, but we've also got subtropical areas. So, coming from snows to subtropical New Zealand.
Yes, New Zealand is the place that we are. But I'm not sure how that happened, but okay.
Yeah, but the context to that, for anyone who's wondering what the hell we're on about,
Yeah, yeah, go for
um,
it. I'll let you know.
okay, so we came across someone who had another podcast that they were doing, called Campfire Philosophy. It's like, excuse me, we've been
Yeah,
using that name for a little while. We
politely.
work something out. Yeah, politely,
Yeah.
politely.
Yeah, we just
Yeah,
send a wee email through saying, "Hi, just so you know, we exist. Hello."
yeah.
And yeah, they promptly went like, "Oh shit, sorry." Um, but yeah, they. I think it's just his channel, but he has guests.
Yeah.
Aaron J Simmons, and he said that he might do a collaboration with us, which would be cool. Hopefully, we
Mm.
can set that up at some point. And gave us a shout out on his latest show this week, and said that we were in Scotland, operating out of Scotland. So thank you for that.
Yep.
I think I've got a tartan here somewhere. Perhaps I should put that up on the in my background for when we have the interview with him.
Yeah. Well, my name traces back to Scotland, so it's not
Likewise.
entirely off base. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. An odd guess, but I'll take it.
Yep. So,
So yeah, we might have a guest on at some point soon, hopefully. We'll see how things go. Um we might be a little outmatched, but I don't know. Give it a
what's to
crack.
be lost by taking the bull by the horns?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, as long as it's not a literal bull.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
doubt he'll be as violent as a bull, so we should be fine.
No, I think it'll be fine. It's just yeah, he's actually an academic with
Mm,
credentials and we are not. But it could be interesting all the time. There's always value to be had in discussing ideas, and hopefully we can have a good conversation, see what comes of it.
mm. There was a thing along those lines that came to mind recently that we've talked about, or I've used the phrase of demanding the right to be wrong.
Mm.
And I don't think that's right because I think Peterson describes your rights as someone else's responsibility, where what we're pursuing is we are we are taking on the responsibility of being wrong because oh, if everyone restricts what they say to what they know to be right, then all they're doing is following a dogma or an ideology and they're not discovering any new ground. But someone who
Ah,
goes
we're
out
taking the risk.
knowing, yeah, it's like it's a certainty that we will say things that are wrong, so that we are
Mm.
taking on that responsibility to say things that are probably wrong at some point. But
Not admitting fault as if there's something wrong with that, but
mm,
accepting. Yeah,
being
it's a
incorrect is not an
challenge.
error.
It's a
Or it's
call to adventure almost. I see what you
mm,
mean. There's the responsibility in the terms of a challenge, a risk. Things may happen because of it, and we will deal with them as they come in that sense.
mm.
There's something there, but it's on the edge of my understanding. That's interesting.
Yeah, because there have been many people who have been ostracized in various forms throughout history, sometimes extremely violently, because of being wrong according to some other metric, either the masses or a particular dogma. And speaking truth to power or otherwise implies that you will be speaking the truth as you see it, implies that you will be factually incorrect at some points and demonstrably wrong. And also the more subtle forms of you will say things that people disagree with. And so you'll be wrong in the eyes of others. And so it's almost like you have a responsibility to say things that others deem wrong for reasons of personal values. And there's an element there of more objective things, like you try and say things that are as right as you can, like not supporting heinous acts. We wouldn't do that. But at the same time, there are things that are outside the value structure of our current society which are not inherently objectionable. They might be things that we or people in our society would find uncomfortable, like that guy who commented about his discomfort with the idea of arranged marriage. Like saying our one comment so far, saying things that people find uncomfortable in the sense of anti-fragility. Like if you drain, I'm not sure, I explained this to someone recently and I'm not sure if it was here, I can't remember totally. Does it ring a bell for you?
No. Oh, maybe.
Okay. But there's a book called Anti-Fragile I read some of because it's a massive book. And if you take something that's fragile like fine china and stress it, it'll shatter or it'll develop a crack that will grow. The crack will not shrink on its own. If you take something that's strong, like say a steel bar, bend it no matter how much you want, it won't break if you're just doing it with your arms. Take a tree, and while you may be able to snap it, if you just stress it, so bend it back and forward, like the wind does, then it will grow stronger. A tree that grows where there is no wind will be weaker than a tree that grows where there is wind. A person who lifts weights gets bigger muscles. I don't do enough of that. But we as humans are physically anti-fragile. As long as we're not pushed to the point of breaking, the damage that we accrue and then heal from, the healing being an important factor. It's like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. No, it's the healing from what didn't kill you that makes you stronger. And once you've healed, then you can be stronger than you were at the start. But if people are not faced with challenges, intellectual or physical, in a voluntary sense, I think that's important too. People have to take on the challenge. If someone's just trying to defend themselves and hide from the challenges in a psychological sense, then I think it activates different genes.
It's a retreat pathway. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you don't grow from that physiologically. You don't form new neural pathways from that. But if you are attacking the problem,
traumatizing.
If you're hiding from it, but if you are attacking the problem, then you are actively attempting to grapple with it. And as much as you may fail with that and only find it distasteful, if you actually, the more you try and grapple with it, the more you grow from that. And so by saying things that are wrong according to some or other metric, that will challenge people to grow themselves, even if we do in the end up having gone down a complete dead end of intellectual exploration. So being wrong is a responsibility, not a right. And yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to never do anything. But that's not where value is to be found. Like if it's a risk in a certain sense, it's an adventure. And there will be costs for it. But someone has to do it in order to keep the culture alive, or the collective conscious alive. And in a certain sense, we're taking the responsibility by doing these things even though they are distasteful, or discussing these things even though they are distasteful to the current Overton window.
Even if that doesn't feel distasteful to us, because like a disagreeable
Yeah.
person revels in it. I'm not a disagreeable person, and you are not. You're disagreeable, but also not in other ways.
Yeah, I am high in disagreeableness and very
In that
low in
sort of
agreeableness.
sense.
Yeah. But I also am quite high in neuroticism. So it's not comfortable for me to go through legitimate tense experiences with people.
Mm.
But when a conversation is not tense, when a relationship is not threatened, or violence is not threatened, then I can push very far on the intellectual front because I'm not afraid to say things or call out things that I disagree with. So it's a yes and no. Useful for this, not so useful for asking for a raise, which would be someone who's legitimately disagreeable.
Mm.
There seems to be something there about it. Just while you were talking, the idea came up in my head of there is a belief that there is some form of belief in the current understanding that all damage to to an individual is negative.
Mm.
That it's hard to hit on this. Example would be the idea that women are damaged by pregnancy. Just obviously, my wife's had kids. This is a thing that we've heard people say often. And it goes against the idea of anti-fragility. It's this idea of there is some form of perfect state that man exists in at whatever peak of their life. And it seems to be a common belief that the only way to hit that is to not interfere. And almost all interference is preventing reaching that, or after hitting that point in terms of age development, damaging it further in an unrecoverable way.
Or that there are certain things that interfere with that just need to be removed, and then you end up amputating elements of the self.
Yes, in
Like,
service of other elements of the self.
yeah, like the idea of anger, or like anger being a bad thing. The idea of being angry being bad, and certain social subsets would agree with that it's never okay to be angry. You should always sort things out amicably. And it's like, okay, there is some value to that you should not become angry arbitrarily or for no reason. But at the same time, it's part of who we are as people physiologically, and both denying that causes harm to yourself, and it is a powerful tool. If it's
Yeah,
a loose cannon, that is a danger. If
yeah.
it's
If it wasn't helpful, we wouldn't have it.
Yeah. If it gives you the strength and motivation to protect those who you care about, or to combat an unjust situation that you and others are caught in. Like, I'm upset and angry about being caught in this unjust situation. Like, just this evening, I was going back to a shop to return something because I'd got it based on some dimensions it had on the box, and I'd assembled it, and it wasn't those dimensions. And I don't blame the shop. I would put the blame on the people who decided to put that label on that product in some country with a lot of manufacturing in it that's not this one.
Yeah, shocking.
But
Yeah.
it was interesting to observe the frustration, that little bit of this annoys me and I'm going to fix it, that I had going to return that, because I've been on a journey of
Yeah, this isn't
opening that
right.
up.
Yeah, a voice
Yeah.
said, "This isn't right," and you found an opportunity to set it right,
Mm,
rather than going, "Oh," and being nihilistic and saying, "Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. I'll just get another one,"
mm.
which is defeatist.
Yeah, or saying, "Oh, I'll be able to make some use of it, even if it's not as much use as I would have wanted."
Yeah, anything to avoid confrontation. It's like
Mm,
confrontation's been it's like confrontation has been systematically eliminated from Western society.
mm.
It's unacceptable in all circumstances to be confrontational. Because what if it hurts someone's feelings? And speaking to the anti-fragile nature of humanity, that's an immense loss, an
Yeah,
opportunity loss.
yeah, as with all things, there is a balance to be struck. Like, too much confrontationalness will obviously cause harm.
Mm,
Banning confrontationalness, it puts the advantage and the power in the hands of those who have other non-confrontational tools, like sort of semi-passive lawfare or hiding. This is just the rules. You just got to. This is our rules, and
mm.
so on,
As
and
long
or
as you can
company
maintain a
policy.
mask of virtue.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not being
feel like
confrontational. What are you talking
yeah,
about? No, you are. You're being intolerant. Therefore, there I am justified.
yeah,
Which actually, that
or
probably explains the massive outburst in demand for aggressive power and aggressive action, seizing and using power, and legitimate violence in all states, all aspects of Western society.
Return of the Repressed.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. Hence why the second that people get power who are pushing that kind of narrative, immediately start attacking everyone.
mm. Fiery but mostly peaceful protests. Cube burning building
Yeah,
down behind
yeah. We must be absolutely intolerant of intolerance.
them. There was an interesting thing I a response to that came to mind recently. Not that I had any opportunity to put it into practice or anything, but why would I want to be so uniform? As in, someone says that's unfair, or and that's discriminatory. Why would I want to be so uniform and
Mm,
identical as all of you? I am not equivalent to anyone else. I am an individual, and I will not be pigeonholed or scraped clean of any identifying features. One person is not equivalent to another. Every person has unique gifts and capabilities, and some people suffer enormously. Some people have amazingly easy lives, and that's not determined by some arbitrary physical feature.
Well, it's not surprising to me that at the same time they attack meritocracy, they also attack the idea of quality or difference in value.
Well, it's like I was talking about that thing Nietzsche
That's what I
wrote.
mean by dis. That's what I mean by discrimination. Sorry.
Mm, yeah, Jordan Peterson talked about it, and someone turned his discussion of it into a song, and then that's quite good to listen to. But talking about how was Nietzsche born? I should look it up. But he was hundreds of years ago.
18 something.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. So he was a philosopher who attacked the philosophical foundations of everything. He
Mm,
he had no sacred cows.
no.
He went after them specifically. Like, he attacked the church of the day and every power structure he could see. And he was known as the philosopher who announced the death of God, meaning, in my humble understanding of it, that he perceived that the pinnacle of the value hierarchy of Western society was now empty in the
Yep.
cultural sense. It was no longer held by God as the ultimate good of the value hierarchy. It was
Mm-hmm.
empty, and so he foresaw that that would result in a collapse of that value hierarchy and the rise of an ethos of radical equality. Because if there is no difference in value of anything, then everything should be equal, and any difference must be merely due to those with power making themselves higher.
Yes,
And so the very
but
basis
also
for a meritocracy.
power
Yeah.
becomes the next valuable, because you follow that through, then, well, whoever has the power makes the rules, and seeing as I know that everyone is equal and people with power are abusing those and making everything unequal, then I am morally justified to seek power and use it against my enemies, described
Mm.
as, yeah, that idea of I am such a better angel that if I was in control of the tyrannical system, I would usher in the utopia. Sure. I'm sure everyone thought that who had that position.
Well, I don't think you even need that. It's just that the idea of there being no value system to judge you by, you can't be a better angel because there is no better or worse. It's like if someone has to have the
Mm.
power, why not me?
Yes. Yeah.
Or why not my group or my identified individuals? Or and then becomes a any if there
And
is no
the
better or worse, then
Yep.
any means are justified to achieve the goal of power, and then
Yep. Mad scramble for power.
yeah, and mutilation of children.
Yep. Yeah, and that's why the lefties were all in favor of the communist revolution and what was happening in Germany, because these
Mm.
were simply people expressing their own political ideologies and doing their own thing in their own nation. I could not possibly criticize another nation because everything's interpretive.
Mm. There is an element of people should be free to govern themselves
Yeah, for
as a
sure.
personal value, but
Yeah.
there's also like Hitler was bad. He did bad things. That's a lot of ethics seems to boil down to rather than here is this arbitrary structure that shall define ethics. It's more let's look at how people act and try and determine what structure they're already following. Like
Mm.
the test of
Emergent.
yeah, the test of an ethical theoretical structure is by finding objectionable cases within it, like edge cases, and then it's like, oh, that's objectionable. Why? I don't know. It's like this isn't the structure that emerges. This is a bad simile of the
Yeah.
ethics that we already follow, and some people follow the emergent ethical structure more or less well. Some people are more prone to impulsive, violent acts than others. And so it's a sort of culture wide emergent pattern that we're trying to define. But there's definitely something there. And pretending that ethics are irrelevant or merely constructed doesn't work.
Mm. Arbitrary. Yeah.
Mm,
As always, everything about humanity's culture is something that evolved.
mm,
And in an evolutionary landscape, there are more and less successful things,
mm.
which means some ideas are more or less valuable.
And the number of ideas that don't work is far number than the number of ideas that do.
Hmm.
And that's not to say that a new idea will necessarily be bad because we've already found the best ones. No, it's saying that in the Pacific Ocean, there's a lot more ocean than land.
Yeah.
Like, if you're on an island, don't just jump off the sea into the sea and start swimming because you don't like the island. Like, okay, go find new islands, but don't just say, I don't like this one, so I'm going to go.
Yeah.
No, no land is better than this land. It's like be
I
very
think we
sure
mentioned that
to.
before, is that as human beings we have this natural oscillation between conservatism and liberalism, at
Mm,
least in the modern sense, because it's traditional and with ideas that work, and then new ideas when things are stable.
mm,
It's experimentation. Things are unstable. We need to make them stable again. Okay, things are stable. We have room to experiment.
mm,
And I think we've mentioned before that if we wanted to make the optimal society, we keep that cycle, but we just shift it like 10-20% towards stability. So that in order to do the experimentation, it's either less extreme or it needs to be more of a, what do you say? Oh, the word's escaping me. A higher threshold to pass in order to enter into that side of the equation.
But the median of that cycle, oh, so many things like this are thrown out of whack because everything's changing so fast in our society. Like just the means of
Yeah.
communication, and
Yeah, we're in such a weird spot.
yeah.
I think.
Yeah. But I think it's a good segue from that to the other idea we were discussing, um, in terms of an insight into the subconscious of modern culture through modern media as mythology.
Mm,
Now, I'm going to need to define myth in this sense as I'm understanding and using it, because if you talk about the myths of a culture, most people these days will interpret that as stories that aren't true. That's a myth. It's not true. But like the mythology of a culture is not intended as historically or scientifically accurate records of history of what has happened, not
mm,
even by mere symbolism. Uh, you often have apparently conflicting mythologies taking place in the same area with the same characters and being passed down in the same culture simultaneously by the same person.
mm.
So a myth is not. If you look at a movie that's aimed at children, adults can usually see, oh, here's the moral of the story, right? Those are simplified versions of the same thing. Like, one that comes to mind, I'm not sure how many of the audience will be familiar with it, but there was a TV show called Avatar: The Last Airbender, or The Legend of Aang,
Mm.
depending on which continent you're on, I think. And nominally, it's a kids' show. It features genocide.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's not really a kids' show, but I think the hope was that stuff would go over kids' heads. But it's a lot of stories seem to develop cult followings or particular fan bases. And if a story resonates with you, that means there is value that you feel in the story. And I'm not saying see, I'm saying feel, because this is
Mm.
not an intellectual perception.
Yes. Yeah.
You can
Because
perceive it
your
intellectually.
subconscious, yeah, you can, but it's because your subconscious sees the value in it.
Mm.
Yeah.
And a simple story, like a kid's story that has a bunch of laughs and some simple moral, that's relatively out in the open, and there's normally one or maybe two morals of the story. Whereas a more complex narrative, you've got many characters going through their own arcs, going through their own development. Like I've seen it described as having one of the best character development arcs of any modern media in a bunch of places. That it's got one character who oh, goes down a whole bunch of dead ends of life's purpose in a sense, which from the outside you can say, yeah, that's a bit of a stupid path to go down because you just betrayed this person. But at the same time, it's like given the upbringing, he saw no other option and he was driven in that one direction, and he had another character who was trying his best to be what this guy needed. And I'm trying not to spoil things,
Mm.
but um, Another one. Now, I don't want to spoil things, so I can't go into too much detail about that. But the other one that came to mind was the Transformers franchise, which is like giant robots fighting, ah! And you see
Yeah,
the same things with giant mechs like Pacific Rim and so on.
yeah, that's a
And
good example.
if I look at that, the basic narrative structure of that, and compare that to some of the Norse or ancient Greek mythologies, you have gods, like good, powerful beings, fighting titans or frost giants. And that is a massive simplification of those mythologies, right? But the idea of powerful good beings fighting powerful bad beings, and then you get a bit of testosterone and excitement from the battles and so on. But that idea of clashing powers where humans are relatively small. In Pacific Rim, like we are the gods in a sense because they're human piloted. But in Transformers, like the gods, the Autobots, are from another realm, another
Mm.
planet, um, and you could replace what was their planet called? I haven't watched enough of it to know.
Their war
Sorry.
takes place on our soil, which is an interesting analogy too.
Yeah, they came down from their Mount Olympus to
Yeah,
fight their battle amongst humankind. And then you've got the various forms of Decepticons, or I think there's more than
yeah.
just those, but the evil robots. And it turns out that they were both, well, they are both the same type of being as well.
Originally from the same place, they're both same beings, but they've been buried under the soil here for a long time.
Yeah, depending on
Yeah,
which version, whether
it's
they
it's
crash
it's very
land.
similar
Yeah.
to the Greek stories. Yeah.
Mm. And my point is that these are archetypal story patterns, and Jordan Peterson's done much better jobs at analyzing stories like this. He did Pinocchio and The Lion King and so on, and
Mm.
drawing out a lot of value from those stories in a articulated sense. But my point is that by looking at the narratives that are popular, we can see what the feeling is. Like there's a lot of post-apocalyptic stories these days. There's a lot of sort of nature good, Avatar with other Avatar, Blue People, Pandora Avatar, and that sort of live in harmony with nature. And it's like, okay, those are speaking to desires within or perceptions within the collective psyche.
I would like to object to
Yep.
that
Okay.
because they're failing and losing money across the board, and the companies who are making them are going under.
I was thinking of, oh, I'm not sure about the later.
The first Avatar
Um,
did really well when it came
hmm.
out,
Was
but
that
no
more
one
for the
watched it.
CGI?
It was because it was a
Ah,
massive,
yeah.
like no one had made a movie that well done CGI wise.
Mm,
And also, even
yeah.
though it was laden with propaganda, it was also a very much a hero's journey
Mm,
of the main character.
a more archetypal pattern.
Yeah, yeah, and it was actually that's interesting. It's like a Pocahontas story, except for it is a Pocahontas story, except the main character is the male of that story and not the female. It's effectively Pocahontas.
Yeah, Pocahontas told from the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I have kids, so I've seen the movie Pocahontas, and it has the male side of the story told as well.
Mm,
Although I think, yeah, they wanted to prevent the fight in actual Pocahontas to prevent war and death. So there's a difference, but I guess in a certain sense, small victories.
mm. Well, I think
But
that.
there is the notion of
Mm,
you really hit on something of very very well told stories develop cult following,
mm.
and I think cult following, which is a term we use, pop culture,
Oh,
is right on the money. Because what is religion except that scaled up to the biggest degree for stories that are so well done and so fundamental to human nature that they capture a large portion of humanity for thousands of years. And especially in a time when, well, that's interesting, when there were less stories, or there was also a higher barrier for the transmission of stories.
Mm.
So in order for something to get transmitted across the populace, it had to be incredibly good.
Mm.
Like all mythologies, the Christian mythology, Norse mythology, the Roman mythology, all of
And
these religions.
and it's often far, far better to take an existing mythology and add your bit to it. And if your bit is good, then
Mm,
that will get transmitted with it. If your bit is
which is
bad,
what
then someone,
which is what happened.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
where
the
you get all those
Bible is
competing
an
stories.
amalgamation of earlier stories
And you
mixed in. Yeah.
rather than
Ideas
oh
develop. They don't come from
yeah,
nowhere.
yeah, rather than interpreting Zeus as merely a very promiscuous husband who's put up with by his long-suffering wife who beats him up every time he gets home from impregnating another human. She and he are archetypal patterns. So the precise actions and the consistency of the story is semi-irrelevant. It's here are the ways things work out. Here's both like there are husbands who go out and party and get drunk and come home with the wrong woman, and then people can laugh about that. But at the same time, there are patterns of what would be the right way to phrase this that won't get misinterpreted? Sparks of new ideas and life being planted.
Mm.
And that's what Zeus represents. New
Or all
growth, new
stories.
life. Well, Zeus in this particular story, like all
Okay.
stories
Yeah.
represent that, but Zeus
Yeah.
is that
It's the
stereotypically,
progenitor.
yes, yes,
Yes.
he's the progenitor of many things within uh, that mythological structure. He is not the one who sits there nurturing. The one who sits there nurturing needs that spark, that seed, to be slightly crass if you determine it that way, to have something to nurture. There are other forms of similar patterns at play, like Hercules and his tasks. He's going out there in a combative sense to take on responsibilities and tasks. Though at the same time, there are many tasks that can be performed in a masculine or feminine way. It's like we've talked about certain things being archetypically feminine and certain things being archetypically masculine. And a nurturing man is not the same typically as a nurturing woman. There's overlaps and bell curves and so on. And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a full-time single dad. I nurture my son, right? I don't do it the same way as typically a typical single mum would. There's differences there. And those aren't lacks, they're differences. Nothing's ever perfect, but neither are we. We're not meant to.
No, we're
We
not meant
could
to be
not live
perfect.
imperfect.
That's for the realm of gods.
Yeah. And so the gods in the mythologies are perfected,
Hmm.
distilled essences.
Hmm.
That's why they act in such oh
Meta-human.
yeah, they're unbalanced in certain specific directions in
Yep.
purified ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
How
They're a
does
category, an abstraction of patterns.
like if you
And you
want
can
to
express an idea in a story before you can express it explicitly, which is why
mm,
people fall back on telling stories about their lives to express ideas. Because you can understand a story before you can understand something explicitly, and you can express an idea as a story before you can express it explicitly.
mm,
You don't jump straight to articulate understanding.
what was it? There was
Representation in action, and then representation in story comes first, as of course,
oh,
because everything evolved.
there was another example of it that I thought of before, and I'm trying to track it back down, that I thought mirrored the Thor Loki archetype in the sense of trickster and builder. Like Thor's weapon is a hammer. That's not a weapon of war, nominally. You can certainly hit someone over the head with a hammer, but if you want to go to war, you make a sword.
Joker and Batman.
That came to mind too just now, but I don't think that was it. There was more to it than that. That you've got the like Loki and Thor are of the same race. Well, I'm
Kind of, yeah.
yeah. I think originally in the Norse mythology, Loki was half frost giant or something. I'm not sure, but
Yeah,
they were colleagues, you could say, and
and brothers.
yeah,
Yeah, it's the hostile brothers. It's Cain and Abel.
mm, yeah, and then there's oh, I thinking now. There's a bunch of scraps I'm trying to bring together here, so it's not fully
Yeah.
coherent. But the Marvel franchise has been very successful. That contains some of the archetypical patterns, and like if we look at the gods of that system, they are human with human failings. But then you look at like Iron Man, one of the top ones. He and you can contrast that with Transformers. He kind of represents the power and inherent good of technology.
Mm, no, I disagree with that,
Yeah.
because technology is often expressed as the enemy in Iron Man movies. As far as I'm concerned, in the gods of the
Mm,
Marvel franchise, which, by the way, talk about something having a cult following and affecting culture in a massive way
mm,
in a semi-religious story, because it has literal gods in it. He is the Jesus figure, as
yes.
far as I can tell. He is the human being who acts the right way, and in doing so brings about the ultimate good.
Oh, it's interesting.
Like there's nothing that he doesn't have any special abilities besides, and he's also quite a flawed character.
Yeah, it's interesting. Contrast
Besides
him to Captain America in that way.
acting right. Yes, yes, where he has, although he has a very good story arc as well. There's another reason why
Mm,
those two are actually the main characters.
mm,
That's why they keep having the Civil War movies. Is that it's those two really, and then the others are sort of the second tier characters.
mm,
And then obviously the big baddie being Thanos, which I actually really liked, because his um his argument was always a very Malthusian one, and he is the evil guy, and I like that. Although
mm,
they failed on that last movie to really, or the last two, explain why that's wrong, why he's misguided. They just sort of left it,
mm,
which is why I think the franchise fell off. Second to last movie was a good movie, and the last one was just trash.
mm,
And that's why what was the massive cultural phenomenon and had massive influence on culture crashed and burned after that, as far as I'm concerned, because they were
mm,
leading up to a pinnacle, and they had a chance to make the ultimate point, which was Captain America's ethos, Iron Man's ethos versus Thanos's ethos. And they
mm.
didn't really have any kind of legitimate argument or exchange.
They didn't give him an ethos to
Yeah.
to fight
But
against.
also,
He was just saying, "I will destroy you for my
he had to
reasons."
sacrifice. Yeah, he had his reasons. But the
Mm,
problem is that the good guys didn't express why he was wrong.
mm,
They just said it's bad to kill people. They didn't actually say that his logic was wrong.
mm,
They stood on moral principle of thou shalt not kill, effectively, which give
mm.
them credit for.
Yeah.
And then he sacrifices himself at the end. He
Mm.
dies
I want to
explicitly.
Yeah, I want to go into more the Captain America, Iron Man dynamic here from an archetypal perspective that you started on,
Mm.
because it feels like there's more in there, or more to enunciate there, that or more to articulate. Like Captain America is arguably more Jesus-like in the sense of no, 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 no. Let me try again. He follows his rules, his own rules better. He
Yes.
has his moral compass and he follows that. And sometimes that's in disagreement with the moral compasses of others, but he follows his own ethos better.
Yeah. Here's the
Um,
Civil War movie.
he's a more purified version. He's a more
Yeah.
purified person in a sense, which is part of his backstory as well.
Yes, but he
But
doesn't have an arc.
he is
Mm.
the immovable object in many ways.
Yeah. And I think that's why he's second
Mm,
in the story.
mm,
He's the guiding angel effectively because they have that Civil War movie
mm,
where it's those two versus each other, and he wins the argument in the end. At the
mm,
end of the movie, Captain America wins the argument, but
mm.
Tony Stark is still the main character of the whole series.
Yeah, because he's the one who takes the responsibility of being wrong. He makes the mistakes. He's got a lifetime of being a playboy weapons manufacturer and a bit of a philanthropist too, but he drove fast cars. He got the girls. Like there's many comments in the first movie about what was it? When Pepper Potts finds him trying to get out of the suit. Let's face it, this isn't the most embarrassing position you found me in. It's like he is no stranger to screw ups in any
No,
way, and
no.
he goes in with bravado and his own
Hmm.
power of construction.
The greatest man isn't the one who was made, who, yeah, he started from a dark place and became great.
Mm. He was the mechanic, like in the movie where
Yeah, yeah.
the
They
second one I think
emphasize
it
that
was.
really strong. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's not the good figure. He's the one who built the good figure.
Yeah, he wears it like a mask,
Mm.
literally, with a face mask and a full body armor mask.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
remember that scene
It's
where
the
he
shining armor and not him.
yeah, he has that panic attack and he sort of stumbles out there into the armor that then closes around him and gives him a diagnosis. And it's like, then he flies off away. And it's like,
Oh, fake it till you make it.
yeah. And
He
so he,
builds something that is a symbol to the world, and he was the first one to go public in the series. Like that's
mm,
part of the big part of the movie is that he's the first one to step into the light, and they reference it all the time going forward that the others come up behind him.
mm.
He draws them out, and he sets everything in motion
But he's
because he was
probably
the first one.
like, when he, what was it?
But he doesn't feel worthy of his construction of
And
the
he feels the weakest to
yes,
himself because
and
he's
he is.
acutely aware, like
He
the
is the weakest.
Chitauri
Yeah,
invasion, like
yeah,
he's a normal human essentially, but he is most acutely aware of his own and their all their own vulnerabilities. And
and he has the biggest dark side of all of them.
mm,
Yeah, the other characters don't have that much of a dark side. Like even Black Widow, who has this horrible, tragic backstory, she doesn't have as much darkness in her. They always reference her past, but her character in the modern day sense doesn't have that. Whereas
mm,
him, you see him the way he behaves throughout the series, and they had a whole movie focused around it where he was in the wrong and he went too far,
mm,
and he had to have his friends pull him to pieces so that he could see it.
mm. Like Black Widow's main weapon's essentially a stun gun.
Yeah, yeah, she doesn't. Yeah, I mean, she does have a gun, like she does kill,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's something about that character because there's one of the movies where, was it, Scarlet Witch gets into all of their heads
Mm.
to try and get around them.
That was a mini series, I think, where she
No, I
made
think
that little realm.
no, it was a series of
Oh no,
it,
the scene
yeah,
where they first meet
Ultron.
her.
It was in the
Yeah,
Ultron movie.
yeah, okay.
Um, yeah, Black Widow's character and what is it, the Archer guy? Both of their characters
Yeah.
sort of just go into traumatic memories.
Mm. Oh, he
Warring's
escaped it, I think.
up in space.
He saw it coming because 'cause he'd been, in it before, and
Oh
he was
yeah,
like,
that's
"Hell
right.
no."
He didn't even have it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they tried to focus on him as a character, but I don't think that worked too well. Thor ended up thinking about his own power being damaging in the destruction that it wrought.
Mm.
And then, yeah, Captain America and Iron Man both had way more intense versions of themselves. Like, Captain America had his dark side exposed of not being able to exist without conflict.
Mm.
He's the righteous man, but also he craves war.
Mm.
And then Iron Man went to the dark place of, what would I be willing to do in order to defend that which I care about, which is the real
Mm.
dark side of humanity. Of,
Yeah.
if I had a reason big enough, what actions could I justify? And the answer was risking everything, including the thing that he cared about.
Mm. And then that really leads into the, like,
The fact that this
him
is hard to
passing.
articulate makes the point, doesn't it?
Mm.
It's a
Yeah, there's
successful story because it's on the edge.
yeah, and then it kind of passes the torch at the end onto Spider-Man as his successor, who he saw as better than
Mm.
himself.
Yeah, which is
Like,
why he was the only series that succeeded after the fall of the final movie.
mm,
Because he's the only other character who has real moral arc, and he sort of came up later in the series,
mm. And of
dealing
course
with
the
the power left over. Yeah,
yeah, of course the characters themselves have much deeper roots than just those movies, which is how they got to the movies in the first place.
and partly why they're successful is their
Yeah,
cultural understandings. Yeah.
yeah, and that a lot of that comes from what's his name, the guy who wrote them and did all the cameos.
Oh, yeah. I know
Yeah,
his face, but also,
yeah.
yeah, you got to realize that yes, this was a massive story,
Mm,
massive set of movies, and it did really well in the cinema. But these were just written by ah, but yeah, they were just comic cartoons written in 50s, 60s, something like that.
mm,
Um, and before that, nothing. They were just wee stories that he made up. But they had enough meaning behind them that they captivated society for what, 75 years?
mm. Well,
It
first
started
first
as a
with
small
children,
cult
and then those
following, and
children
it
grow up.
grew and it grew and it grew and it grew until it got to the
Mm,
point where $300 million movies were being made about it.
mm,
Like that is that's not a movie or an idea or a story that come and goes in the space of 6 months, like most movies or most stories or most books. That's in the realm of, Harry Potter or The Hobbit or even the DC stuff to a certain extent.
mm. They haven't
These
done the
are
movie side as well.
No, they haven't. But Batman, like,
Mm,
they just cannot stop making those movies because there is value in that story of trying to stand up to corruption without being corrupted yourself through the power you wield
mm,
to destroy corruption, like just and trying to maintain moral lines and struggling with that.
mm,
The idea of a story can captivate humanity as a myth and inspire people to follow and think about it all the time, like mini religions. The greater the story, the more successful it is, like Star Wars, Star Trek.
I think that the
and destroy
comparison
them.
to them as mini religions is very apt because,
Mm.
like, there are certainly people for whom that takes as much energy, as much focus as a religion would.
Yeah, yeah. Sufficiently complex and meaningful stories will captivate people's attention and imitation or imagination.
Mm,
And they can only do that if there is value there.
mm,
Or the degree to which they do that is the degree to which there is value there that can be understood at the present time of society.
mm,
We talked about it before the show. I don't know if I got it in the show, but the idea of the successful artist is the person who expresses the idea that's on the border between conscious and unconscious.
mm,
If it's too far ahead of their time, the idea being expressed will fall on deaf ears, and then they'll die never seeing their work succeeded, and it might come to succeed like 500 years later. No, it's not 500 years, but Van Gogh springs to mind for me. Many philosophers were not particularly successful in their time
mm,
for the same reason.
mm. Also, like, I'm just sort of trying to collect a few data points of the track of successful stories. Like, if you go back
Mm.
to when Star Trek started, that was a very hopeful story. That was a very things are going to get better story. It's like, sure, there were some rough patches in the Star Trek history, in the Star Trek narrative history, like before the filming took place.
Yeah.
But to go bravely and discover new worlds, or however the precise quote goes, um, and then that Serenity or Firefly is the one that's coming to mind as one of
Mm.
those stories that had a
Firefly.
strong resonance. And
Yeah,
that
massive
was,
following.
yeah, that took place. What was the description I heard of it? If you had Star Wars and the rebellion lost, and Han and Chewie went back to smuggling, and then collected a motley crew,
Yeah, that's Firefly.
um, and then so the main guy in that
Except
is
the main society isn't quite
mm,
so explicitly evil because it's not such of a children's story.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like tone the Empire down to be not so evilly evil.
Mm.
Tone it down to be just like it's just an empire. They do their
I
thing. They have a
really
bureaucracy.
I really like subtle stories like that. Like
Mm,
there's actually a video game that I've been playing. The video game nerds have been playing Starfield, but they have this kind of dynamic of it's very similar actually to Firefly. There's like
mm,
a central civilization, and then there's like a second group that's very much more liberty minded, and the central one's
mm,
very order minded. But both of them are accessible. Both of them are like nice to be in, but there's like small things on the edge of it. With like
mm,
the free one has more problems. It's like there's more problems here. There's less protection, and then on the other side of it, it's like there's a little bit too much order. Like they've drawn the lines just to where there's like a hint of uncomfortable, but if you don't think about it, you won't see it.
mm,
And I really like that. And Firefly was like that. They had their moments of explicit propagandism about it, but at the same time, it was very much like, okay, Sentinel system's bad. Why? Well, I don't know. It's very nice to live there. It's not so nice when you're outside of it and dealing with them, but on the inside, it's quite nice.
mm,
It's not explicit, the way Star Wars was of they are just pure evil for no particular reason.
mm.
It's just all power and they're 100% gone too far and obviously must be destroyed at all cost. It's like, cool, okay, fine. The real story is about, family relationships and the hero's journey of the individual. But I like stories that that are more subtle on the political situation in which the characters are acting in, and Firefly was a great example of that.
Mm.
Sorry for the tangent.
It's all tangent.
Yeah, well, good point. I just forgot what we were talking about before.
Yeah,
I hope you remembered.
I was just thinking of a more recent one that I'm not familiar with, but
Mm.
Cyberpunk, or
Oh,
what's the
yeah,
thing? Yeah,
Cyberpunk, yeah. It's
yeah, but
amazing.
post various forms of post-apocalyptic future, and like, okay, why do people watch that? It's like because it resonates something. You feel a value in it, and
Oh, yeah, that's right, we were talking about Star Trek. I wanted to make the point of you said it was a very hopeful story that things will succeed in the long run, and
mm,
it's like, okay, yes, true, but my wife's actually watching the original series at the moment, so I'm seeing it on TV every now and then. The what it seems to me to be a story of how would humanity, given our current values, deal with these situations? Like they're encountering things they've never seen before, psychic powers and things that defy reality, and they're trying to navigate it as morally upright people, but
mm,
also because they're out on the fringes of society, or literally out in deep space, they don't have the kind of resources to just clamp down on things. They have to
mm,
be a little bit more flexible and navigate their way through them as they're, isolated in their environment as a small group of society going out into the chaos. And that made me think of post-apocalyptic scenarios in movies as well. I think it's less about how we got here and more about how would human beings deal with being here. You know,
mm,
how do our morals and our systems and our structures play out in this environment, like space movies or Fallout, which is a
mm.
great video game and also a show now, but I haven't watched it because they destroyed a bunch of the lore and made it quite woke. But yeah, shocking, right? That's also effectively the same thing. Yeah, there's things to shoot and blow up, but a lot of it is how how do people deal with these circumstances? How do they act? What does it mean to be moral in this environment? It's playing on these ideas and testing them, and in the case of a video game, literally testing them because you can try out different options or
Mm,
go down different paths. Like in Fallout 4, there's a bunch of different factions, and one of them is very authoritarian. Their ethos is technology caused all of this problem with the nuclear war, and therefore, in order to prevent it ever happening again, we are going to take all the technology for ourselves.
mm,
Okay, yeah, power can only be trusted in our hands. There's another one who is trying to get around the solution of genetic degradation, and their solution is to replace humanity entirely. Is like, okay, that's not
with
really
what?
like robots, effectively
Oh, okay.
conscious robots that believe they're human, but they're not. And it's like, okay, you're not really saving anything. And then like maybe culture, but not really.
Mm,
And then the other one is effectively, oh, there's four. That's right. Um, yeah, there's another one that's all about freeing the robots that are under the control of the second one because slavery arc. Got to get it in there somewhere. But those two factions sort of have a debate about the nature of consciousness, and that's interesting to explore too. And then the final one is simply help as many people as you possibly can and try and rebuild as many support structures as you possibly can to keep people safe, and then defend from the other two aggressive factions. And it's the idea of you're in this environment, there's a whole lot of chaos, there's a whole lot of people that are unethical, and there's a whole lot of people that are, but are also unable to defend themselves. How do you proceed? How do you act in this environment? And I think that's a lot of why we are drawn to stories that are not set here and now,
Mm.
because we know how we behave here and now, sort of. It's always in the extremes. What if the story or the scenario of my life was so extreme that it put me in this position? How would I act? Or what would even be the moral action? Hence why good stories will always have difficult choices for the protagonist to make. Or even in the case of movies like The Joker, of the wrong choices were made, but you can understand the scenario or the
Mm.
position that this person is in. And I think, back to the Marvel example, a lot of it is, if one was given power, how could they act in a moral sense?
Mm.
And how would they walk that line? And probably the reason why Iron Man is, or Tony Stark is the Jesus figure, or the great savior figure of that environment, is that he doesn't walk it perfectly, but he doesn't make the same mistake twice either.
Mm.
He
Yeah, I've
struggles
seen it.
for believing in it consistently.
Yeah, I've seen something that was pointing that out, taking all the times something went wrong and then pointing out here's how he built it so that wouldn't happen again. Like
Yeah,
Rhodey, his suit shut down and then he crashed and broke his back. And then Spider-Man's suit had a parachute and things like that.
yeah,
That he incorporated all his mistakes along the way, like going from
yeah.
a physical shield that could be blasted away and then he runs out of nanites to a energy shield that won't blast away, and small details like that. But the character embodies learning from his mistakes
That's an
while being
interesting
tortured
thought,
by them.
actually. That's a really interesting thought, because we live in a technological world now where we have tools to be used to do action in the world. Oh, that's very interesting. The great messiah for society for the last 2,000 years was Jesus. And
Mm.
that's in a large part, I think, because of the sphere of influence of an individual person was potentially always going to be small. So he was entirely about, how should you act in your own life to make the greatest things happen. And
Mm.
a lot of his, philosophy, if you want to demean it to be so, still applies.
Mm.
But if you were going to make the ultimate archetype today, you would have to incorporate use of tools and use of technology into it, because they are force multipliers.
Mm.
Simply living your own little life and affecting your own little environment might not be enough anymore, given the readable, how readily accessible influence force multipliers are.
Mm.
That responsibility, that which is abdicated, will be taken up by your enemies. We live in this world where all of us have a voice that can be projected upon all of humanity to influence others. And if you lived meekly, I mean that in the real sense, not the other sense, and turned the other cheek and exempted patience, and didn't use these tools to attempt to influence the world, then the people who were influencing the world for degeneracy, who are very motivated to do so, would drown you out. It's
That's a form of
oh,
yeah.
that's interesting. We've talked before about ideas developing from acting them out to representing them, an individual acting them out, to individuals imitating that action, to representation in story, to explicit expression and understanding. And these are how ideas evolve or develop in humanity. I wonder if the battlefield of cultural ideas, or I want to say the word memes, but that degrades it, evolves in this way too. From individuals acting out to stories of how individuals are acting out competing, to explicit expression and argumentation.
I'm not sure I see the distinction between the two concepts you're referring to there. I might have missed something.
Well, perhaps it's something that's more obvious than I had thought, but I had thought about that in terms of all of humanity being a part of this process. But now I am thinking about the realm of just action used to be just action. And perhaps now the realm of just action is the realm of storytelling, or perhaps it was the case that was the case. And now it might be the realm of just action is the realm of articulate expression. As in, the responsibility that you deny will be taken up by those who oppose you. Jesus told you to live well, to be the antidote to all of these things. Perhaps the answer now is to live well,
To speak well.
and to. Oh, that was always the case too, but I don't know. It feels more emphasized now.
Well, yeah, speech. Like of all the things that technology amplifies, speech is the greatest in the sense of articulation. And I think in a sense, like programming is halfway between action and articulation, because you're articulating your intent into a program, and then
And we're
that
not far
causes an
away from
action.
it being just articulation interpreted into action.
But if you like, we've got cars and airplanes and vehicles that expand our capabilities as individuals in many ways. Like, we can travel further, we can apply greater force with a machine, but the being able to it's a multiplication of the growth factor on resonant ideas.
Yeah.
So a resonant idea can go viral and get 1 million hits in a day. How? Oh.
I'm trying to think of. Okay. I think I explained my previous point badly. I want to try again, because knowledge evolves in this way, which I think I described that pretty well. But what I'm saying now is that the evolutionary landscape for that which succeed and that doesn't might have crossed over one of those boundaries. That once upon a time we simply acted, and those who acted the right way succeeded. And then after that, those who imitated those who acted the right way succeeded. And then after that, those who expressed the right stories and imitated the right way and acted the right way succeeded. And we might have crossed over into a boundary where expressing it explicitly becomes a requirement to succeed evolutionarily.
Because if you have to
Story's not
communicate,
enough anymore.
yeah, if you can if you have to communicate with people face to face, and then those people communicate with others face to face, and writing's expensive or little known, then your actions will speak far louder than your words. But if your words speak louder than your actions, I think there are those who, well, there is the temptation to speak without acting and
Mm.
to engage in hypocrisy. And there are many who do that, and sometimes it's successful. But if both act in concert, that's most powerful. If you're just acting without speaking, then no one knows, and you'll affect a few people around you, and they might speak it and draw attention to it. But the fact of there being so
That's why
many
martyrs are
ideas
so successful.
because other people speak about it.
Yes, but also they embodied their ideals right to the core of action,
Mm,
right to the limit of dying.
mm.
Like their ideals were bounded in their existence so much that they were more important than life itself.
A
Each
recent
level that you add on, you still require the bottom levels to be
mm,
successful. But you have the bottom level battleground, and then you add on top a new layer, a new battleground. So
mm,
simply acting based on instinct, to imitating those who are successful, to stories being influential on those bottom layers, and the battle being fought out on the story level, and now the battle is being fought out on the explicit level and the story level and the action level all the way down.
mm.
Which might be why Peterson went so viral the way he did when he first came out. Because he was action right to the core, because he got famous by defying, by saying, no, I will not cross this line, and I don't care if you kill me. And
Mm.
he was very explicit in that conversation.
And then
I
stuck
will
with
not
it.
do this. I'm not going to prison. And the person's like, "Why? You won't. Yeah, you'll just get fined." It's like, yeah, and if I don't pay the fine,
Mm,
like, oh, you might get community service. I won't do it. You might go to prison. I won't do it. It's like, I
mm,
will go on a hunger strike. I will die before you make me do this, or before I accept punishment.
mm,
And that's why he blew up. But also because he had the action. He was he was giving deference and respect to those he was imitating, great thinkers that came before him. He was expressing and believing in these stories and able to articulate the explicit values that were trying to be expressed in those stories. And I think that would explain why pure religion failed in the last 150 years in terms of Christianity, because they didn't go beyond that belief in the story to extracting out the value and making the value the primary. Oh, that's interesting. Whichever is the highest level of societal, not combat, it's cultural evolution. Ugh, meme warfare.
mm.
As much as that phrase has been memed, it's quite actually explicit in terms of Richard Dawkins' idea of meme. That's what that would be.
And it kind of works
Whichever
both
is the
ways.
highest level of the battleground
Mm,
for evolutionary success within society, or without it at the bottom layer, is the paramount one. Where once it was initial action, as soon as it became imitating those that were greater, if you did it based on your own action rather than imitation, you're more likely to fail. And once it became the story level, if you simply acted out the things without expressing the story of it, you convinced no one. And now we're at the point where if you tell the story and have the imitation and respect to the other and have the action, it's still not enough because people think you're stupid.
mm,
Now you have to have it integrated all the way up into conscious understanding and articulation. Hence why Peterson's words carry such weight and value, and why he exploded into success, and why people who have been expressing religious stories for a long time failed.
Mm.
Perhaps they didn't express it in articulated idea, and even if they did, they didn't stand on the principles the whole way down to death.
Yeah. He's really an interesting case because I don't know how many people are aware of how big an influence he as one individual person has. How many people have been greatly influenced by what he's said
Yeah.
and done all the way down the hierarchy you were describing, and
I
how
don't have
much.
enough fingers on one hand to count the amount of people's lives that I know were saved by his words.
Mm,
And I don't mean saved in terms of made better. That's probably more than two hands. But I mean legitimately saved.
mm,
I think particularly with our generation, and particularly with the age that my generation was when that message hit,
mm.
late high school, nihilist stage, I think that's the reason why he blew up in the way he did.
And particularly with those who most needed to hear that,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah,
in a
well,
lot of,
subconscious calls for it.
yeah, in circles where they weren't utterly desperate for it, he was probably, oh, that's interesting, and then move on and not really made an impact. But
Yeah,
he talked about how little encouragement people need, and talk about meeting the people who needed
men
basically
specifically.
knowing, yeah, men specifically, but not only, but meeting the guys who just needed someone to say go for it and
Yeah,
almost nothing else, and a bit more articulation than that around that, of course, but someone to say go for your thing.
yeah,
And the
and
people
it's
who,
heroic to do so.
yeah, and now he's starting his own university
Yep.
essentially, which I'm
Yeah,
sure that
I looked
won't
at
be
that and I
so.
went like, ooh, if I had more time in my life, that would be very interesting.
Yeah,
I'm
and
still tempted because it's not actually that much money. Oh, it'd be a great gift for someone, wouldn't it? You'd pay for a year outright. It's like $500, or what in our country, 700 something. That's a
mm,
lot, but also, boy, would you appreciate it.
yeah,
Or even if you did it for yourself. Oh, that's interesting too. It's right on that line of an individual working a minimum wage job could afford it if they
mm,
tried hard enough to, and it wouldn't bankrupt them for life, but
mm,
it was also expensive enough that they would severely respect it.
mm,
It's not like, oh, it's $100 a year subscription. Like, yes, so is Netflix.
mm,
It's like, this is $700. Fuck, you're going to respect whatever you pay that much money for.
mm. Because it'll be a single lump payment, not just a.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
trying to
it's not a
pretend it's
monthly.
cheap. Yeah, it's
No.
not like if something's monthly or daily or something, like daily is $365, $2 a day, you've got it.
Yeah,
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 you think of
I
it that
kind of
way, it
hate
sounds
service.
cheap.
Anytime I see a subscription service that says its cost is weekly, I'm like,
Mm.
you scammy bastard. I'm not playing this game.
Yeah, but if you make it one lump sum, then it's like, okay, I need to scrape together that much, be
Mm,
aware of the other things I could do with it, how much alcohol I could buy with that money, hypothetically.
it's a lot.
And yeah, but it's like the temptation to take just a bit and have a bit of a party or something. And um,
Sacrifice.
yeah, so you're aware of that, and then you pay that, and then you're like, okay, this had better be worth it. And then
Yeah. And
you
he's
do your
talked
best
about that
with it.
explicitly before. If you make
Mm,
something too cheap, it's not valued. Like, this is the reason, one of the main reasons why the iPhone was so successful.
mm,
Like, you have an Apple store, and next to it, you have a Samsung store, for example.
mm,
You go into the Samsung store, there's a table. So it's like a desk size. I have a very big desk, so it's like a desk size. There's like 15 phones here and like 15 phones over there. You go and look at them all. Okay, cool. Isn't that interesting? You go into the Apple store. They have the same size desk. There's a single phone in the middle.
mm,
And the point is, this thing needs all of the real estate. It's a psychology point of, this isn't the cheap thing. This is the great thing. And
mm,
yes, it's more money. Blankly. Which is why, even though you can buy Android phones that cost the same amount or more money, they don't have that same amount of cultural influence, respect, cultural respect in the minds of the average person. Whether you think it's justified or not is kind of irrelevant. But it's the point of, if you make something cheap enough, people won't value it. You know, like a free movie on Netflix. You go and turn on Netflix because everything feels free. It all feels like shit. Every single time you scroll through it, go, oh, crap. But if you paid $15 for a single movie from one of the, buy or rent streaming services, you're going to sit down and get the popcorn out, and you're going to make a thing of that movie because it cost you something. You have more respect for it.
It's how movie theaters survive.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
which is why I'm not a big fan of streaming, period. Because it cheapifies everything to, I could play it whenever I want. No, there's no value in it besides the value of the thing, which makes it an incredibly competitive landscape. Hence, YouTube. The things that rise to the top are amazing pieces of content because they have to be, because it doesn't cost anything. Otherwise, it's just treated like trash and feels that way, like junk food.
Yeah. How much recording is that?
Hour and a half.
It feels like a good episode.
Yeah, we went all over the place today. Marvel movies. Who would have thought that? I feel like I was pretty happy with my wee cultural battlegrounds idea.
Yeah.
One of those points of, oh, well, I could be stupidly wrong, but it feels significant or important.
Yeah, it's one of those when we usually don't go where we think we will.
We never go. We never go. Oh, we didn't touch that much on Cyberpunk when it came up. I kind of wish we did.
Yeah,
I've been thinking a lot about AI hacking, and that game is very severely like that. All the people have implants, and you can remotely hack them to, deal damage or distract or confuse.
There was a thing
and you can invest all of your skill into that, and you can fight your way through the whole game without ever raising a fist.
There was something I saw, an early Neuralink adopter, and I think he's paralyzed or something.
Yeah, I love that video.
I don't think I watched the whole thing, but yeah, he described it as like having auto track or something. Like he just has to start forming the thought of clicking on something and the mouse is already there.
Yeah, it won't be long, because this is why Neuralink will take over, and it will. All of our communication technology, which is all computing, and all of the digital levers, let's say, work that can be done and created or manipulated, is done through indirect means. And we have evolved from the beginning of computing from very, very indirect means, from writing code where there wasn't a screen and then seeing if it worked, to and way earlier than that with the rotating dials, to the first terminal interface with the first Apple computer, and then later on to the first graphical user interfaces, keyboard and mouse inputs, and then eventually touch or voice. And these are all indirect ways of getting action done. But if you get to the point where Neuralink guy can think about clicking a specific place and it does it for him, then you could strip away the GUI entirely and give commands to action. Oh, I want to do this thing. Done. Oh, I need to edit that episode. And then it just does it in the background on a compute unit somewhere without you having to intervene or act.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain gives Intuit commands to what I'm going to assume is actually likely AI hooking into APIs as a receiver and then doing action.
Mm.
And it happens on the compute and you are kind of separate from that process. And then
Oh
whatever
god,
result comes back gets fed back to you.
I was thinking about that. Like, oh, what was it? So you're saying
But that
that
would
it's
be read write,
probably
of course.
yeah. So you're saying that it's probably a you've got all the electrodes poking into a piece of the brain, and then on the compute side of that, you've got essentially a neural net AI of the modern type that then spits out a bunch of outputs that are
Yeah.
then read by a digital computer. But then what if you expand that AI section out?
Hmm.
And it's like that would expand to become part of the brain.
Infinite leverage. Well, like we already feel like we've lost part of our arm when we've dropped our phone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like you say
Yeah.
your pocket. It's like, where is it? That lump's
Yeah,
missing.
yeah. And there's a panic. It's like this is fundamental to my survival and existence. And we don't panic about anything else like that ever.
Yeah, yeah. Like someone taking your phone is, yeah. Or it's like,
Yeah,
what was it?
people
There was a,
would rather get money stolen
yeah.
significantly more. Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah, there was something I saw about. Oh, what was it? Um, the skit was animated skit was demonstrating the idea of what it's like to be in a healthy relationship, and so guys washing some dishes and girls near him leaning on the table. His phone, which is on the table, buzzes, and he asks her to check
Yeah.
who it's
What is it?
from. And oh, my passcode's such and such, and she's like, what? Why are you asking me to check your phone? And because she's not used to a healthy relationship, but it's like the level of intimacy of being in a
Oh,
romantic relationship with someone is similar to them
that's
seeing your
insane.
phone.
Think about it. As an individual, your phone is an external part of your brain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like even just paper
When you are
can be,
in,
but
yes, yes, but it contains so much data and communication. It is the digital it is an extended part of your brain, and so is all of the internet, but it is the bridge piece between it.
mm,
So this is individual to me. It communicates with the massive hive mind, which is the internet. And I think
mm,
we'll get to the point where massive hive mind, which is the internet, is one AI or likely a small series of AI governed by a larger AI. And then the individual device with me is my AI and my data, and they talk to each other, and then I talk to it as a pathway.
mm,
Kind of the way we have levels of networking now, where it's my network, my router, ISP network, ISP router, country network, country router, global network, and it scales up.
mm.
You're likely just to have AI at every single step to be communication.
I'm
Anyway,
still a techno semi-pessimist in a bunch of ways, but let's go down this rabbit hole.
well, I didn't say that was good. I said
I
that's
wasn't.
what I think is going to happen. Um,
Yeah, let's keep going.
yeah, yeah. Assuming the lights stay on. Um,
Different thoughts, but yeah.
okay. Assuming it doesn't kill us all. Whatever. Your phone is a digital extension of your mind, or it's a separate piece of your mind. If
Mm,
you're in a sufficiently healthy relationship, that extension of your mind which interacts with the internet, is something that you would be comfortable with your partner looking through, as if they were looking through your mind.
Mm.
So if we consider ourselves cyborgs but for the surgery, because we just carry it with us rather than inserting it, therefore, if you have a sufficiently healthy relationship, would that not make you and your partner borderline merged in a cyborg sense?
Mm.
If I can look into my partner's phone and she can look into my phone and neither of us has qualms or hesitation about it, the distinction between the two of us is less.
I have a suspicion that for the two of us, because of personality similarities I'm aware of, the level of merging within a romantic relationship, or the level of blurring of lines of self, is that we're comfortable with is higher than the average. Like I think,
Yes.
like there's
Yeah.
the idea of healthy
Like,
boundaries in a relationship.
there was a difference between my wife and I when we first got together. I wanted
Mm.
more merge than she did, and at now we're in pretty well alignment.
Mm.
But I think yes, more than the average. Like,
Mm.
say, if we needed to look something up, we wouldn't go and find our own phone. We'd get the one that's closer.
Mm.
Now, at least mine was like right over there, and hers was right. Maybe
Yeah,
I'd get mine.
there's a boundary.
But if
Yeah.
hers was in front of me and mine was over there, I just use her phone, and
Mm.
vice versa. I don't go snooping through stuff, but if there's like a notification and she's in front of my phone or it's like over there, she'll look at it and she'll tell me what it
Mm.
is, or vice versa. Oh, hey, you got a message from Thingy. Do you want me to say anything back? Like
Mm.
the distinction is blurred, and also because of that, every now and then we will act as if we're the other person. Oh, can you send them this thing? Or someone will message her and I'll just quickly fire off a response that I know she would say to them
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
she's busy.
I've had a conversation that at first I thought was with you, and then it turned out to be with her.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, it'll be partly her and partly me. And that's my
Mm.
point of, okay, this is the case now where they're separate from us. What happens to when we get internal Neuralink? Are we going to have a situation where partners will want to like merge their Neuralink subnet rather than each being their own network? They become a dual network.
Oh, that would lend a whole new meaning to the phrase breaking up.
Yeah, it would. It'd be like moving in together, but like in your mind, sharing your digital mind. God, that'd be interesting. I think it will happen if Neuralink becomes read and write rather than at the moment with it just being read. It's an input mechanism. But the second it becomes read and write, screens gone, physical devices carried gone. Everything becomes networking and networking of minds.
It would take a while, I think, to get from. Well, the right phase would take a while to develop, just as any technology. So
Yeah,
it's not just gone,
cultural
but
would be pretty resistant,
mm, I'm
but
not sure
I
how I
don't
feel
think
about
it's preventable.
it. My take
Like
on
it might be something that our
mm,
generation could opt out of,
mm,
but I get the feeling that the generations below wouldn't, because you'll get to the point where you go for a job interview and they're like, "Cool, we think you're right for this." Da, da, da. What's your Neuralink IP? Like, oh, I don't have one. I just have a phone. They're like, no, no, sorry, pass.
they're
We don't do that
millennial.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I'm Gen Z. Like, I'm still, it'll get to that point. But person who's coming straight out of high school, they don't have that choice. They can't just stay in the job they're in now. They don't have one.
Mm.
And they're like, oh, how am I going to send the contract to you? What am I going to email it? What are you kidding? Like, people don't mail contracts to anyone anymore. And it won't be long until it's all done through applications and not email, in which case you need a phone and not a computer. And also, yeah, if you didn't have a cell phone, no one would give you a job now, because what if I needed to call you? What, I'm going to email you and hope you respond? Get real. It'll go that way. And some people will be able to hold out, some people won't.
It's a
Now,
little
obviously,
bit,
that'll be longer because it's literal surgery, but you'll
yeah.
also get to the point where it just becomes like state funded. It's like, oh, this is a public utility. All kids go to their Neuralink surgery at the age of insert age because it helps with education.
the things that come to mind,
Hence the
the
cyberpunk world, by the way. That's what it is.
yeah, the one of the largest sort of technical hurdles that I'm aware of is the power consumption of AI servers in the current state, because from what I heard, like the companies that are building AI servers would have to make hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're currently only making it from investment, not revenue,
Mm.
in order to make any money on the servers they're currently installing.
Well, I imagine it'll be a bubble in the same way that social media has been,
Mm,
where you have all of these ones crop up and compete and compete and compete, and then it'll conglomerate into like 2 or 3 major ones, or effectively one major one in each domain,
mm,
which is what we have with YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, effectively.
mm.
Each has their own domain. They're the only one competing in that space. Everything outside of that, gone. But once upon a time, there were 50 million of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the chips would get more efficient over time, of course.
Exactly. By the time that big collapse and crunch happens, where, oh no, we really need to make money now, which is why all of those services have cranked up the ads to nth degree, and
Mm,
everything else stopped and turned off because the investment dried up, which means they had to be at the state where they had critical mass enough to make money.
mm,
And those who have are succeeding, those who haven't, not succeeding,
mm.
which is fine. But I imagine it would be the same thing with AI. You'd have all of the competition and all of the innovation funded through investment money, and 10 years down the track, the investors will go, all right, I've given you enough billions of dollars, time for you to make me some money. The ones that were going to fail would fail. The ones that aren't are going to, in their eyes, hopefully be integrated enough into society that they can start charging charging for them in a sense that people will pay and will pay off their bills. And then they become a main staple part of society that people can't give up, and
Mm.
therefore they can make money.
So I'm just envisaging a CrowdStrike scenario on the AI back end.
Oh.
Like the more
Well,
complex the
it's the
system,
same thing. It's like, oh, internet's down. Oh, shit. Well, I can't call anyone. I can't text anyone. I can't get any information. And if I have like an officey kind of job, I can't do it.
yeah, half my brain switched off.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you'd still have your basic natural faculties, but you'd also be much more of a useless human being because you would not have needed to survive on them.
Well, you would have developed your faculties to leverage the additional power of the AI
Yeah.
interface. And I
Yeah.
say AI not as a conscious thing; it's as additional neural network potential
Yeah. Which
that
is
specializes
why,
in certain ways.
people always make fun of my generation for number one goal being like a YouTuber. They're like, oh, they
Mm,
don't want to work. They don't want to do hard things. It's like, no, I think that's the greatest leverage position available.
mm.
It's the most advanced tool that they have. And now it's TikToker, even for the younger kids, because these are the tools with the greatest leverage. Although TikTok's different, obviously,
Mm.
numbers being fake and it being a weapon of war. These are the positions of the most leverage. And I think eventually it'll be, I couldn't even imagine whatever way AI could be utilized to maximize leverage of business. The kids who say, "Oh, I want to be a YouTuber," what they really are saying is, I want to run a small business that can make me a lot of money, that I can do with very little, with maximum leverage. It's not
Mm,
very little input because the people who do it successfully work a stupid amount to get to where they are. It's just they get an even stupider amount of output.
mm,
And kids aren't stupid. They see that and they go, oh wow, if I do make it here, man, I make it big. And I can have massive reach and influence, which
mm.
is valuable. And then, yeah, you have the sections of the population that are in like low service areas. But also, what's his other company? Starlink. There are no low service areas anymore. So, not sure how that's going to work.
What's the bandwidth limitation on that like?
Starlink.
Yeah. In terms of net
Uh,
total pipe size, so if everyone switched over to using it.
I don't know about on the satellite side. I have no idea what
Mm,
their specific uplinks, but I have a Starlink dink, Starlink dish outside on my porch, and I get 320 megabit down on a good
mm.
day, 280 if it's a bit cloudy.
'Cause I remember
That's fiber speed.
I
It's
remember
just
hearing
got
something
about an
about
extra 30 seconds, 30 milliseconds of ping,
yeah.
which isn't much. It's really
Mm.
nothing.
I just remember something about there being a certain density of users that it could handle, and beyond that, like in the city built up areas, it couldn't handle everyone.
Well, yeah, but now
Mm.
all you need to do is add more satellites.
Yeah. Oh,
More
hopefully it doesn't
satellites,
trigger
better
Kessler
sensor
syndrome.
arrays. What?
Hopefully it doesn't trigger Kessler syndrome. One satellite hitting another, causing a burst of debris that hit five others, that hit 50, that hit 1,000.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a way to make them not anti-fragile in that way, but immune to that.
What he's done is put them in a low orbit so that orbits decay. So they an individual satellite uh, would be unlikely to, like, if it switches off, it's going to decay down and crash. The individual satellite lifetime is short, although they have thrusters that
Right,
put
I
out
see.
a ridiculously small amount of thrust, but it's enough to keep them up.
Enough, yeah, and then they
Yeah.
drop, and they may spread a debris, but hopefully that debris will go down
Mm.
as well.
Well, the thing about the debris that comes off a satellite is that some of it ends up slower and some of it ends up dramatically faster.
Yeah,
And that's the
yeah,
danger
and
of it.
then that can go. Yeah, anyway. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. Perhaps there's you could have something, an emergency electromagnetic switch. I don't
Mm.
know how you might be able to defend. Like, I'm not that mechanically minded, but I imagine that there will be some form of solution.
Mm.
Same with the power thing. People, I say people, you say these things often of like, okay, but there's this limitation and there's that limitation, and my brain always
Mm.
goes, yeah, until we transcend them, like we have with every other limitation ever for all of history. So,
Mm.
we can't do it now. Doesn't mean we won't be able to.
I think I'm in a. I don't. Well, also, I'm in a. I'll believe it when I see it,
Yeah.
but if I see it, I'll just deal with it.
Yeah, I don't know what this. We must touch on this disagreement more sometime when we're not
Mm.
approaching 2 hours, but there's some fundamental axiom belief that you hold that is this techno pessimist,
Yeah.
and I'm the opposite. And I don't know what it is, but yeah, I don't know. It always rubs me a little bit of like, okay,
Mm.
why are you resistant to these ideas so much? Everyone's entitled to their beliefs, I suppose, but that's not really what
It
we do here.
it feels like it's in general terms, like you see the ground as sloping 5 degrees that way, and I see it as sloping 5 degrees that way, and there's a trend sort of that as you project out on the future, you see things rolling one way, I see things rolling the other way.
Yeah. What you see things as an arc going
I
up and
see.
coming down again.
Well, I see a higher cost of complexity and higher fragility with complexity, and a statistical likelihood that that will cause the complexity to reduce in the future, especially with less energy to support it.
Yes, but I also see more decentralization and localization of components of that complexity, making things less interdependent.
And that is a very interesting scenario that may result even in the type of complexity cost centric view that I'm looking at.
Yeah,
It may
I do
result
have a very
in,
techno-optimist.
yeah.
I'm not sure entirely what that's based on. My
Mm,
mind is saying it's based on the progression of technology throughout history as I understand it, but it feels a kind of an arrogant cop-out answer for some
mm.
reason. But yeah, each of us has this axiomatic belief, and yeah, I feel like it has to be reconciled at some point.
Yeah, and I feel like it's also near the level of religious belief in the sense of psychologically.
It's certainly an axiom. Yeah, like it's
Mm,
very foundational to um both of our belief structures and personalities almost.
I'm waiting to find out what the downside is.
Here's an interesting question.
Mm,
Do you believe in aliens? You made the religious comment and got me thinking.
okay.
The UFO side of things.
Yeah. Okay. There are a few answers to that, and I think I can get through all the categories. Do I believe that there are other planets with life? Definitely. Other planets with sentient, intelligent life? Highly, highly probable. Sentient, intelligent, technically focused life? Probable. That physical life from other planets getting here? Highly, highly improbable. But do I believe that there are encounters with non-human intelligent entities on Earth of some nature? The evidence suggests yes, and so I fall down on the probably yes,
Okay.
because people experience things, and I'm inclined to believe the weight of evidence.
Okay. The reason I asked that
Yeah.
is, um, as a techno pessimist, how could they pass through to being in that position and we couldn't? Like, if someone else can pass the great filter, then why can't we?
If we're talking about other physical biological aliens on other planets, I don't think they have, by and large.
You
Like
believe the
the
entities that we've seen to be spiritual in nature?
that word is loaded. By your understanding of it, I would say yes, but I think a better word for most people would be extra dimensional rather than extraterrestrial.
I'm in agreement,
Yeah,
but I don't see the difference between extraterrestrial and extra dimensional. I believe them to be the
extraterrestrial.
same.
Okay.
I believe that, okay, to be clear, I
mm,
believe that the extra dimensional beings are extraterrestrial beings that have acquired technology or developed technology to open up the other dimensions to them.
I would think they started from. This is all highly speculative
Yeah,
for sort
yeah,
of
of
more
course. Yeah,
into
yeah, yeah,
our own
yeah.
psychological state than the physical, the
That's why it's at
reality
the
of
end
the
of the show.
universe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I
Love
would.
metaphysics. Love it.
Yeah. I would expect that the extra dimensional aliens started from uh, a different starting point to us. Like, the phrase that comes to mind is like a higher energy. Like if you have electron
So
orbitals, you can go to higher energy states. A dimensional
the extra
location.
dimensional ones were always extra dimensional. Is that what you're
From
saying?
our perspective, yes, they evolved in a different dimension, and from that
Right.
they can reach into ours. Or
I see.
they can build technology there that can get them to influencing ours in some ways.
I think that's why we have this disagreement.
Hmm.
I don't think they are. I think they're extraterrestrials
Who
who,
shifted their, say, frequency up to the one that could move between stars?
yes,
Hmm.
and no. I would say that they would be multi-dimensional beings and exist in both. And I would also make the case that humanity is no different, hence the spiritual aspect of humanity.
I think
People with
we.
astral projection abilities, I
Hmm.
believe they operate in that same plane. And my contention would be that they got sufficiently advanced in technology that science entered the spiritual realm and they were able to amplify the connection between those two realms, perhaps to be able to travel between them at will, or perhaps that the higher dimensional, the lower dimensional version of themselves could become more. If you talk about it in the spiritual realm, I suppose I'd say that the primary day-to-day consciousness of those beings went from being in our realm to being in the greater self realm,
Hmm.
and that was a transition they made through evolution and through technology.
Hmm.
And perhaps they still have physical biological forms that are living about on their own world in normal,
Hmm.
and perhaps they travel here in other
I,
senses.
I think I would personally put that in the plausible but unlikely category, but not impossible.
I think
And
this is why you said it's almost a religious belief. The reason why I ask this question is I think it stems from the interpretation of the evidence of whatever the extraterrestrial things are, assuming
mm,
they're extraterrestrial, that we have seen in evidence.
they're certainly extra human, you could say.
Yes, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good example. Yeah.
Though in saying that, there are also certainly scammers, there are also certainly cases of mistaken identity, there are also certainly those who are causing
You
experiences.
gotta
Say,
gotta
give
give the
someone a dose of
caveat.
LSD and
Gotta give the
then,
caveats.
yeah, sneak someone a dose of LSD and fly a remote control blimp over their house and then see if they see aliens.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
But okay,
caveats. Not
given
every case.
caveats, I think though that the current state of humanity, both in a physio-psychological sense, that whole realm, and a technical and cultural sense, are far enough removed from that possibility that I view our current purely physical, technological path as having diminishing returns that we are experiencing and that will continue. So I'm not saying there aren't paths.
I see. I think I see. I think I agree and disagree at the same time.
Mm,
I would agree that if we stayed on the purely material trajectory, we wouldn't end up going very far.
and I don't think we'll leave that within the arc of this civilization in this broader culture. Give it 500 or 1,000 years, maybe. But,
You
well,
believe that there'd be a sufficient crash to Stone Age us before we could get there? I see that.
not Stone Age, not Stone Age. Like, in the decline of a civilization, there's typically a 90% reduction in
I
population.
don't think I care about the civilization.
Yeah, there's a big difference. Okay, what do we care about crashing and saving and so on?
Yeah,
Do
like
we
if I'm
care
thinking
about
on a
saving the US
50,000 year
Congress?
timescale, yeah, if I'm thinking 50,000 year timescale, then I think things will work out.
Yeah.
And I think whether or not it's this civilization or the next or the next or the next will depend on the moral constitution of the individuals that make up that society. Hence my always insistence on the moral nature. I don't think the success or failure of any individual civilization to climb this technological ladder that I believe ends up in the place of opening a physical door to the spiritual realm and merging with it. And I think that's the interdimensional travel that is possible. I think it's less physical and more higher dimensional. Vibrations, I'm sure we've talked about that before, but we don't need to go on it with everyone.
In a very
But
speculative sense, the technology that would be needed to do that wouldn't necessarily be recognizable as technology to a modern Western mind. Like,
well, yeah, if you didn't know how to interact with it, then no.
Yeah, like if the technology as such that would need to be constructed in order to accomplish those things needs to be
the
constructed on a higher
abstraction would
dimensional
be
side.
it would be so well, I don't believe that actually. It
Well,
would
have some
the
components
abstraction
there.
would, I still don't believe that. I think our definition of dimension, I might actually be in the way here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see it as a separate physical space at all. I see it as a layer on top of this one. Yeah, the abstraction needed to get there would be so far from where we are now that we wouldn't be able to interact with it at all. Because it
And
would
it's not
probably require like Neuralink style telepathy.
maybe, but also that it
Or
would.
it would at the start and maybe not eventually.
Yeah, but I don't think that it's like saying that we're a long way from it as the trap in that thought that it's linear, like a long way in our current direction, but it might be in an entirely rounded maze of development
I
in
don't
order
think
to get
it's
to that
linear.
point.
No.
Yeah, it's definitely not linear.
I think of it like escape velocity. That if a society could get individuals to be morally forthright enough and to follow the right principles enough with the pursuit of truth and understanding the universe enough for long enough, then it wouldn't collapse and it would be able to make the technological leaps needed to hit the escape velocity outside of this realm. And I think you would need to have equal spiritual development at the same time, hand in hand. So I see it like we talked about like a sine wave up and down. I think that there is a way in which you could break the top of the graph if people did things well enough for long enough without falling to corruption and sin. Yeah, sin. When you talked about that religious language thing. 9:30. We haven't even touched on that. Oh. Yeah. But if people didn't act well enough when and also as you go up and up and up the scale of technology, the leverage becomes infinitely increased. And because of that, the amount of people required to make the system fail becomes smaller. It becomes more fragile as it increases, as the leverage increases. Yeah. And I think it is possible to escape that, even if it is improbable. But I think given the timescale of existence and humanity's ability to survive, I think it's inevitable. Or perhaps I believe in humanity enough to believe we'll learn the lessons and be able to make that escape velocity.
Okay, so
I certainly hope so.
I think my perception
Else we might as well extinct ourselves now.
My perception
Which
is
probably
parallel.
people believe that we should extinct ourselves now, actually.
Mm.
That makes sense to me. I see why
I
they
think
believe that now.
I think my perception is parallel, but different in a few ways. Okay, so when we've been talking about extra dimensional, I think the concept that both have in our heads is something like the electromagnetic spectrum.
Higher vibrational.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
which is not a complete description of it. It is a stand-in because we do not have the words to describe it. So
Yeah.
it is not technically correct, but it is mentally or metaphorically similar.
Like a story.
Yeah, yeah. It's a story we're telling ourselves to try and understand things that we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
So
Funny
if
that.
if you have visual light, it will pass through certain things, bounce off certain things, show certain colors and reflection, and behave in certain ways. If you have infrared, um, thin plastic rubbish bags that are black to visual light, or visible light, look clear because the infrared goes straight through. You can see a hand on a thermal camera if it's hidden inside a rubbish bag. Similarly, water that is clear to visual light is black to infrared. You see the heat of the water rather than the heat of things in it. Then you look at radio waves, then you look at X-rays, and everything goes very, very, very different. The world looks extremely different. Similarly, I think we're both talking about states of matter, I think, which are at different points on a similar scale. Like we talked about energy of electromagnetic radiation, and then within the metaphor of the story we're trying to construct, you have different states of manipulable material.
It's interesting that you're focusing on material. Because I always thought of it as states of consciousness.
Consciousness
Like the
can be
vibration.
material.
Yes, they're not separate. They're not entirely
Yeah,
separate.
like E
But
equals MC squared, energy and matter, consciousness and matter. But yeah,
yeah,
this is going down
as
into
you
physics.
go up a vibrational state, it's consciousness, or the state that consciousness is in is the thing that travels up and down the scale. And I think material comes along with it. And I think it can go both up and down, which I think is where the old religious idea of angels and demons fighting out a war in our world is. Forces
Mm,
from outside, whatever crossover barrier, trying to influence.
mm,
One's trying to bring us up, others trying to drag us down. Call them aliens, call them demons, call them whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I came from a secular. Oh, it's not secular, is it? No, just not simply religious.
mm,
It is describing the fundamental nature of the universe as a spiritual place where the state and constitution of one's consciousness is paramount.
mm,
Yeah, I believe that the goal is to get humanity, if you believe in humanity, to go up in terms of spiritual vibration and to cross over that barrier.
mm.
Um, One wonders if we did it before the asteroids came, from some of the conspiracies I've seen before, but that's neither here nor there.
So
I feel like we're going to get a bit esoteric here,
yes,
assuming I know what that means.
I've got a few steps in my
Well,
head.
last time I explained this to someone, I used a whiteboard,
Yeah,
and it took like
yeah.
6 hours. So I'm not kidding. He was my boss actually on my first farm. He was my actual boss who was younger than me. Um, and we stayed up one night drinking till like 4 a.m. And I did this explanation to him, and he rubbed out all of the work stuff on the whiteboard so that I could draw on it, and yeah, it took like 6.5 hours, and yeah, we had work like 3 hours later by the time we finished.
Oh, that's fun.
It's not a simple thing, and it certainly is
Mm.
something that requires that kind of
Tipsy?
visual aid.
Ah.
Well, that's helpful. Um, I actually think that that loosens some of the logical bonds to let the spirit free a little bit, but yeah.
Mm.
Um, it kind of requires that kind of um, visual aid because it is something outside of our conscious understanding, which
Mm.
means the only way we can represent it is in terms of story and analogy and abstractions that are
Similar in function
pointing
but
at a
different
thing.
in
It's like describing an image and the image is pointing at a thing, but the thing you can't
mm.
see.
Mm.
Um, Going back to our stories being progenitors for knowledge, or progenitors, precursors.
Mm.
That's sort of what they are. Here's a bunch of stories that are like pointing at a thing. This thing in this story, this thing in this story, and they're all kind of, in the case of like a larger religious thing, trying to point at the same thing. But they can't just say it.
Mm.
And they can't just say it because they didn't actually have it. And that's why those stories captivated all of humanity, is because everyone went like, oh, you're right. That is a thing. What is it? I
Mm.
have no idea. But oh, my subconscious says that's the thing.
Mm.
And then now we can say it explicitly, so the stories feel stupid to us.
Mm.
But also, people don't even have respect for the thing that can be stated explicitly because they themselves haven't thought about it enough. Hence the
Mm.
battleground being words and ideas now.
Yeah. Do we want to
Sorry,
continue down the esoteric wormhole?
this is
That's
great.
not how I meant to
I
say it, but
it's pretty apt, actually.
yeah. Yeah.
Title. Um, I think we should call it as good as this is.
Yeah.
I can feel myself getting more and more unhinged, and as good as that would be for a show, I think maybe not enough.
Yeah.
We need to
Uh,
start these earlier in the day so we can do one that just keeps going because we always get to this point in the night we're like, oh, nah, nah. And
no one will
always
get to
when I
the
used to
end.
have conversations, yeah, exactly. When I used to have conversations like this with people, when it went really well, yes, alcohol was involved because it usually had caffeine in it and it loosens inhibition. So you have a bit of a fuck it, let's keep going attitude. And then
Yeah.
you stay up till 4 in the morning with whiteboards. And then you go, oh shit, where are we?
I need to get a big whiteboard.
Yeah, we do this in small doses.
Yeah.
This is small doses. We start very basic and then we build up, and at the end of the show we go, whoa, this is getting a bit much, let's call it.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we'll do a big stream and we won't stop, but I think for now that'll do. And we'll touch on all the things that we didn't quite finish next time, eh?
If we remember.
Yeah, I'm not good at that.
Yeah, we'll
Not
go
at
down
all.
other rabbit holes.
It'll
Anyway.
probably come up. Subconscious will remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Meaning
we'll start
limits.
somewhere else and then an hour and a half in we'll get there.
Yeah.
Oh well. Bye everybody.
Bye.
See you next time, whenever that is.